38% of properties in the country, representing 32.8 trillion plus in equity. I want to focus on the high equity sellers. That's where the juice is. And without all of this crappy, risky other stuff. I'm not saying I wouldn't do it. And if I would do it, I'm not even sure I would say it. So there's some things you just keep private because you're like, I don't want other people doing this. Because sometimes, not because it's illegal, but it's like maybe a little riskier than I want other people to take on sometimes. Welcome. This is Property and Paper Live. I'm Dawn Rickabaugh, your host, the owner of NoteQueen.com. Before we get started, I wanted to show you guys, share the screen real quick. I've been working, it doesn't seem like it would take a long time, but just getting books up on Amazon and formatted correctly so that the Kindle version works and also the paperback version works. It was a big learning curve for me. So I'm really excited to sort of start having a presence on Amazon. The Seller is Your Bank. That's also in Kindle version. You know, I went over my OG, the one I wrote in the very beginning, the early days, 2009, 2010, Seller Financing on Steroids. I still love a lot of those stories. There's some stories in there from my early days that I really forgot about actually and haven't repeated in quite a while. So that's still kind of a fun read, and I've updated it with a few things just in the last month. And then, of course, you guys know the Landlord Liberation. This is just sort of a introductory, like you've never heard of, what are we talking about? What's owner financing, seller financing? How can I invest in real estate without dealing with tenants, toilets and trash and all of that. So just wanted to get the word out about that. And so thank you for that. And I'll quit sharing my screen. But anyhow, I want to just tell a story that I promised in the email that went out. Just when I was kind of coming out of my, what do you call it, sabbatical, or where I just kind of went under a rock after late 2020, I think, and early 2020. And I said, you know what? This is crazy. Along with the world, my whole personal world was shifting around. And so I basically just went offline, and all I did is just manage the portfolio I already had and whatever just naturally fell in my lap. And yeah, that was 2.5 years basically. And one thing I want to say about that is what a blessing the note business is, or learning how to create passive income, is that you can have the luxury. I'm not saying I didn't have to liquidate a few things, but I had the cash flow, and I had, this payoff would come in just when I needed, or that payoff would come in just when I needed some cash. So this business not only got me a career that I love, something I'm passionate about when I quit my nursing job, but it also supported me during a time when I just needed to reset my life. And so that's the power of creating cash flow and thinking differently. Not just, yes, we do need big chunks of money every once in a while, but mostly if we can orient to just, I have a little bit more passive income this month than I had last month. That's what changed my life, because then I built a base salary for myself. And so then I didn't have to sweat bullets. When you're only chasing commissions, when you're only chasing broker fees, you can't get off the hamster wheel. You just can't get off the hamster wheel. So anyway, just as I was coming around thinking, and this was in mid 2023, there was actually my cleaning lady. She said, Dawn, I'm having a lot of trouble. Like her husband, now, shame on me that I don't know how to speak fluent Spanish at this point. I really should. But she and I, we can kind of communicate. And she goes, my husband, I don't think he's handling our house situation. The guy that sold us the house, he's kind of buddies. They golf, and he sits at the the bar and orders drinks, and he got us into this house, but I'm really worried. And so I go, oh, well, I know how to help. Let me just look at the paperwork. And so one thing led to another, and I'm looking and I go, hmm. But I don't, I'm slow to want to, let's see, accuse anyone of being less than ethical. So I'm just going, well, maybe he just doesn't know how this should go. And by the way, why wasn't this contract for deed, which is unusual in Nevada? Not so much in other parts of the country, but here we just don't do that very much. Anyway, it wasn't even recorded. So they'd put this down payment money 3 years ago. They've paid on time perfectly. At the time, much higher than the going rent, right? But that's appropriate if you're getting an ownership. But the guy had never protected them. They were just completely hanging out in the wind, right? So the guy could, anyway, it wasn't impressive, but I just figured, well, maybe that guy doesn't know what he's doing. So let's just work with that. Let's get title involved. We'll get this all cleaned up. Well, anyway, he was very much resistant to me getting involved. Oh, yeah, I'm going to record it. Yeah, it was the fall of 2022, I think, or 2020. I can't remember. They said, oh, he told us he'll record it in January so that it cleans up the taxes or whatever. And I'm like, okay, just so you know, you're just hanging out in the wind and he's an older guy. What if he dies? You're not protected. And also the terms are a little imbalanced, but you got a house, right? You got a house. You got you think you have a house, an ownership interest. So anyway, January comes around. Nope, just can't be bothered. February, nope, he's traveling. And by March, I'm starting to get really, the hair on the back of my neck is getting up. So anyway, I start getting note queenish and mama bear. If you've been around, I've got 4 kids. And this is my cleaning lady, and they work hard for their money. Okay. They work hard for their money. They've been working for me in different capacities for a long time. And anyhow, the long and short of it is, we had a conversation, and it was a come to Jesus, where I told him in no uncertain terms he was going to go into title and sign the paperwork just as I put it, and not, he was going to add an extra $7,000 that they didn't owe him in order to close the deal, an extra $7,000 just out of thin air. Anyway, and I wasn't having it, so I left him a couple messages, and I said, at this point, I could send them over to prepaid legal, and this sort of predatory behavior will make it so that mortgage will likely get wiped out completely and you won't get a dime. So what you're going to do is you're going to go into title and you're going to sign the paperwork. And I had to fight with title company a couple times because I think they had a thing going with this guy, a lot of different properties. And I didn't know this at the time, but that'll feed into this story. I just had a feeling they made a lot of money just doing these deals for this guy. And I had to even threaten the title company. I said, this is highly unprofessional. And just so you know, I'm having these people consider legal action, and you will be implicated. So anyway, I've got everybody by the nose hairs at this point. And I said, what you're going to do is you're going to bring $1,347 into escrow to pay your part of the closing costs. You're not gonna, what's the balance of the note gonna be? And it was really fair, even though I really could have pushed him harder. I just stayed fair. Here's the clean deal. You're gonna go in this afternoon and you're gonna sign everything just like I said, and the titles company is gonna record it, blah, blah, blah. And he did. He jumped. He was really on the phone. He was really trying to sweet talk me. And I said, you're speaking with a forked tongue. Nothing you say matters. You don't tell the truth. And all I need you to do is go in and do what I told you. The end. Whew, I can still feel that. I was circling on this conversation out in the parking lot, and wow, that was a charge. I don't think it needs to get that way, but sometimes it does. And I might have chalked it up. I might have chalked it up to, just not knowing, but I happened to be very close friends with someone who golfed with him for many years. And I found out from that guy that, he was always bragging about these deals he did where he would get these people in, they'd give a down payment, they'd pay like 1.5 times normal rent. And then he would just end up the properties again, and he would just do it over and over and over. So he had a program that he didn't really want. He expected he'd get the properties back and rinse and repeat and rinse and repeat. Now, sadly, that has happened. It obviously happened in this case, but it doesn't have to. Those are the kinds of things where gives creative financing a bad name. Instead of it being a win-win and a very fair thing, it's very lopsided. So I'm very, my message is let's do this legally and ethically and not take advantage of people, right? Because this is the most beautiful tool. Any tool, it can be used for good or bad, and depending on the intentions of the person using the tool. So a year goes by. So that must have been the end of 22, because by the end of 23, I just thought, I happened to look up other properties that this guy owned. And I found one other one, and I thought, it's just, all of them were actually only within 10 to 15 miles of where I live. So I thought, I wonder if there's other situations, where the paper is kind of messy or whatever. Long and short of it, I end up finally getting hold of this guy. Well, this guy had died. Actually, not that long after we had settled the arrangement for my cleaning lady. And so it was really hard, but I finally found how to get a hold of the wife, because they had moved out of the area. She was on the East Coast. And she says, it just so happens that I've been praying for someone to help me clean up this ginormous mess. I have no paperwork. He left me no paperwork, and any paperwork I did have, his buddy has, and his buddy says he can't find the paperwork. And that's convenient, because that buddy had a couple of really nice loans from the estate, right? So anyway, the wife didn't know anything about it. She had never been privy. She's the most beautiful, wonderful person who would never think to hurt a fly. And it was kind of a sad thing. And what do? Try to tell your dead husband was not really an upstanding guy? I mean, that's a pretty tough one, but so it's a little delicate. But she goes, I've been praying because I don't know how to fix it. I've gone to attorneys. They want to charge me all this money, and they don't even act like they understand what we did. What I know my husband was kind of doing. He was giving it anyway. So it's like I would have to pay them all this money and then teach them how to do it. So when I sent her the letter and we had the talk, she's like, oh, thank God. And anyway, it was about a portfolio of 8 other properties in this area. And I think let's see. Am I missing one moment? I'm going to take a breath and look at comments. Good morning, Dawn. I've been hearing and reading about wraps lately. Do you wrap? Sure, I do. Okay, remind me later. We'll get back to that after my little ramble. Bob in Mobile, Alabama, in the house. Great. Robin, love hearing Dawn. Get them. Yeah, I was. Yep, sellers like that give us the rest a bad name. That is sure nice. New York City. Who is this? Al? Someone's giving me a compliment. You're a sweetheart. Thank you. Hey, Clarissa. Good. Always good to see you. Oh, sweetheart. Okay. All right. So I'm going to, of all of these, and so mind you, I had almost no paperwork to go on. Now, the guy that held, you know what? I should make a little mini course about this whole thing because it was quite a story. And like, if you come across this, it might help you guys, know what to do, how to think about it. But anyway, my first thing was to go after the guy that was the buddy that owed the estate. He was supposed to have all the paperwork. Well, somehow he didn't have the paperwork, and somehow he was always busy. And then when you were gonna meet, then he said, "Oh, I got to get my mom into the hospital," and it was like it just went around and around and around for a couple of months. And I'm like, I'm gonna drive up. I know he has a property. I can see where he has a couple properties, and I am just gonna drive up there. And then, so a friend of the wife's who had done her taxes for her, she's a very well-positioned lady in the neighborhood, more upscale than me, right? I'm pretty low key. I live on a ranch, I'm a very kind of simple person, but this is a more highbrow person. Well, she and I got in her sedan or her big 4x, and we just drove, boom. He didn't see us coming. We just drove up there and we're like, hi. So anyway, long and short of it, I got a little bit of paperwork because basically I said, you've been telling them that you have a little bit of paperwork about all of these things. I would like to have it now. And I would like to walk away with it in my hand within the next 10 minutes, and then the other lady that he knew, he's just kind of flustered and everything. He's a very fast talking guy. I think he's mostly a pretty good guy. But he was a little squirrely in this situation. That's a whole nother side of the story. But anyway, I got a little bit of a file, but almost nothing was complete and almost nothing was done properly and hardly anything was recorded at all. I had a couple of mortgages. The others were like contract for deed type things or lease options. But I'm going to focus on one, and I got to change names, but I'm going to call her Alice. Alice lost her husband. So, let's just call the guy who died, who had all of these loans. Let's call him Dick. To protect the innocent. Okay, so Dick had made this arrangement, and Alice and her husband made the arrangement. They only had to put like $5,000 down. They got a mobile on land over here, not too far, and they were making the payments just fine. And then Alice's husband died. So then she started having trouble making the payment. Very logical situation. And so Dick had been very nice, worked with them. Oh, you can skip a couple payments, or it's okay if you don't pay for a little while. But remember, that's nice. But in me knowing his orientation, he's just going, I'm going to end up with this property again. Okay. Anyway, so finally, by the time I got involved, probably behind like 8 to 12 months. So I finally get over there, and this person was hard. You can't knock on the door and find him. You couldn't find a phone number that worked. It would work one day, and then, here's my son's phone number. And then it would work sometimes. And then it was just a mess. I finally just just get in the face, go to the door, you see cars, and you just stand there. And I'm like, hi, who are you? Okay. Guess what? Anyway, so I'm basically coming as an ambassador, a liaison. Let's fix this issue. Number one, you need to start paying, or if you can't, let's figure out what to do. The goal is to keep you in the house. We have no paperwork. Can you show us paperwork? Can you show me paperwork? Do you have anything that would help me flesh out the story of what the intent and what the terms were? I can see by a prior pay history what I think your terms were. And I know this is in general what the program was for people in general. And so her son, very tall, lanky guy, who I found out later really wasn't her son, is a kind of Alice was scared of him, and he was kind of taking advantage, living for free, freeloading in the house. Really weird situation. Anyway, he finally dug up 3 pieces of paper, and basically it was kind of a lease option, but just kind of weird. But the terms and the signature page were missing. So nobody had any proof of anything. So, okay. The point is, let's just move forward. So, what can you afford? What's your situation? I thought the son was going to be helping her. I didn't kind of put the whole picture together. But anyway, so the widow that inherited this nightmare portfolio, she's totally agreeable to try to work, but she's like, I got to have income. This is part of my retirement. And I really need the income. I want to be fair, but I also don't want to, oh gosh, she didn't want to be a long distance landlord. And I said, you may just consider selling it, or, well, Alice thinks that she's going to own it. So here's the problem I have is that on paperwork, there's nothing, but Alice remembers what Dick told her. And so there is an agreement there. That's a handshake. The expectation was, and I have no doubt that she was right, he promised we would get title to the house someday. Okay, so anyway, we dropped the interest rate. I think it was at 7, and I think we dropped it to 5, lowered the payment. What are you bringing in? What can you afford? Blah, blah, blah. All of that ability to pay. And great. And actually, the widow brought in money to cover closing costs. Okay. But actually, I told her in the beginning, and I don't know what you guys would think. You can unmute and give your opinion, but I'm going, this person has a history. There's a lot of weird dynamics. It's not really quite stable in the home environment. And I said, this person is so likely to default. And even though theoretically we promised that she would own the property, she was actually scared to own the property because she says, that's a lot of responsibility, because then I have to remember to pay taxes and insurance. And I'm like, I can read the writing on the wall right here, right? I said, but at least you'll have equity if you end up not being able to make the payment. You can sell the property, and even in its current condition, you're going to walk away with $30,000 to $50,000 versus if you stay a tenant type person and you default, you're out. That is it. I don't want to be the owner. That's right. She, in the beginning, she just, no, I'm too scared to be an owner. I just want someone else to make sure things get done. And, so she really kind of wanted the best of both worlds, like somebody else take care of the big problems and make sure everything's okay, but I still have equity. Anyway, it was a tough one. I said, okay, let's do this. She doesn't want to own it. You're going to end up in a default scenario sooner or later. Why don't you just give her a long-term lease, basically like a life estate lease, where we know she can afford this amount. Let her just stay there. You're going to have to fix the water heater's about ready to go out. You're going to have to put out a little bit of money, blah, blah, blah. But at least when she defaults, she doesn't want to be the owner. When she defaults, you just have to evict her. But anyway, the lady who lived out on the East Coast said, I will not do that. I don't want to be a long distance landlord, and I don't want to put money out of pocket. and all of this. She's just got to make the payment, you know? So anyway, that's when it evolved to where I told Alice, I said, look, at least you're going to have equity. And I was telling the title people, because I was like, this is a little unconventional. There's not a big down payment. The credit score is not good. We did make it affordable technically, but her son's coming in and taking money, siphoning money out of his mom's account. But I told my people, here's what we have done to try to be up and up on this. I just wanted title to know. I wanted my escrow to know, because I just wanted it to look clean. And I explained the whole situation. So anyway, that's nice when you have a long-standing relationships with your vendors. But anyhow, I said, at least if you default, you can sell. So anyway, we drew up all new paperwork. We actually put her on title, and it was a mortgage. And that's what the widow wanted. She wanted a mortgage. She didn't want to be a landlord. Sure enough, 6 months later, you know, payments are getting later and later. We set her up with note servicing, licensed note servicing, everything, the whole 9 yards to do it all right, right? Nope. Payments later and later, and pretty soon she's 30 days late. Now she's 60 days late. And I try to go over there, and I'm just figuring, look, now's the time to sell, because now you have equity. You're going to, instead of just dragging this out, and now you're going to have legal fees and penalties and all these things that's going to eat into your equity, sell now. And she's like, there again, the third phone number that she gave me, that didn't work. And then I go up to the house, and there's a beat up, rotted out, burned out car there that wasn't there before. And I go, and then there were some people in the car that I'd never seen before. And I go, Alice, who's that? Oh, well, that's my son. Well, he's actually he's a black man. That's my son, and she's not a black woman. Oh, this again. So this son came to mooch and kicked the other son out, who wasn't her son either. So then I'm going, now we've got a sort of rougher vibe going at the property. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm even safe coming over here, you know, because it started to be like, well, we know people. And if she's going to foreclose on my mom, I mean, we know people, and we know people over there that can get her, you know, well, you better work with us. You know, it started to be that kind of a thing. And I'm like, okay. Now I wouldn't even buy this note at 50 cents on the dollar. I think I'm just going to pass and just, you know, let this work. Anyway, long and short of it, I tell the widow, because she didn't follow my advice. She didn't follow my advice. I said, just put her as a tenant with a life estate that the rent will never increase. But oh, that's silly. I don't want to do that. Well, so now she's like, well, now I should have listened to you, because now I just can't evict her and them and all this. And I go, yeah, so now you need to start foreclosure. Oh, I don't want to do that. It took her, like, I keep telling her, she'd call me. And I just said, it just comes down to this. You have to start foreclosure. Because until you start foreclosure, it doesn't put pressure for something to shift. So long and short of it, that other son disappeared. The foreclosure went far enough where there was the pressure where she finally sold the property, and she still walked away with 30 grand. And then my widow lady, she was happy. She got 100% paid off, all the penalties, all the back interest, everything. She didn't have to discount anything, but she had to go through foreclosure, which is very a painful, scary process for people to do. It's a lot. So that's my story. Do you guys have any comments? What would you have done different? You want to unmute? If there's not a lot of noise in your background, you can unmute and comment. Or what would you have done? I was just flying by the seat of my pants, like, what's the right thing to do? Balancing the needs of Alice, who'd been promised verbally something. There's no contract. Nobody has anything to prove anything. Just a payment history, sort of, right? And then the needs of the person, the widow who needs the income and doesn't want the trouble. What do you think, Robin?
Hey, Dawn. Yeah. So I don't know. I know you're trying to help both sides, so that makes it hard. But knowing that the tenant is going to, obviously she's going to default. I might have, I mean, she had a lot of problems, obviously, it sounds like going on. So maybe to help her in different ways without her realizing is maybe offer her, okay, we're going to sign a short-term lease. You're going to stay, we're going to give you 3 months, 6 months or whatever. Here's what your rent's going to be. And it's just been rent. And during that time, because she's going to fail and she's got those extra people living there. And then during that time, the owner, the widow, could start trying to sell that thing. And so she didn't have to go through eviction and all that kind of stuff. And then maybe even, or offer the lady living there some cash for keys. Say, look, we're going to sell this place. You're not going to be able to maintain it. Doesn't sound like you want it. So here's, $1,500. Go find another place. You got 30 days.
I love that. And we tried that. But here's the problem is, number one, I know what the intent of most of these deals were after working this whole portfolio. But she didn't want ownership, but she wanted to stay because Dick promised her that she would own this house someday. But then when it came down to it, she was scared. Ultimately, she took it, right? But that was the thing. The cash for keys would have made sense. We could have even given her 5 times that, right? 7,500, But it wouldn't have, but she was terrified to leave the property because that's the only thing she could afford because everything else was 3 times the rent that her mortgage was, because we brought it down to like less than $600. And,
wow.
Her next thing was $1,400, 1 or 2 bedroom apartment somewhere, And so I agree that would have been good. And because knowing she was going to default, Robin, it was kind of like, I would rather this end up in my lady, she didn't understand she's going to default. I guarantee you're not going to spend 30 years just collecting $600 a month from this, right? But she wouldn't do it. They all thought I was nuts. Well, would you, her friend that's so great, she's like an accountant type, and she's like, would you sign a lease like that? I'm like, all of a sudden I'm like, gulp. Well, I guess in this situation, yes, because certain things have been promised and I have half a contract and I know what the game was. I know what the sort of, whatever. I don't know. It was messy, but in hindsight, she was wishing that she would have listened to me. But in the end, she did all right. In the end, when she finally would just foreclose, and then that lady, she probably didn't end up with much of it, sadly. She probably some nice more sons came around to help her spend that 30,000. I don't know what happened to her, actually. I mean, when I would take her over there, when the one son that was a little bit scary to me, they were raising puppies. There was like 6 puppies, cutest little things. But anyway, and beautiful little children. So her grandchildren were there, beautiful kids. But anyway, she's like, Dawn, can you give me a ride down to the bar? So that's the last time I saw her really face to face. Can you drop me off at the bar? I got this man. I think I'm going to move in with him. Well, anyway, none of that worked out. It's just weird, though, where you're trying to go, what's the right balance of things? And sometimes you don't know, but you do the best you can, right? But thank you for your thoughts so much. It's that was a weird one, especially with the type of dynamics where, it's just a different way of life that I'm not familiar with. A lot of people live in a little bit of chaos like that. So anyhow, I thought that I would share. But let's see. Thank you so much for listening to Story Time. You can all, get a cup of tea and go to bed now. Story time is over. Okay, wraps. Bob, do you want to come on and let's chat? What's in your world? What's on your plate? Can you unmute?
Hi, Don.
Hi.
What's in my world? Well, I'm just kind of new to all this.
Wonderful. Welcome. Welcome.
I'm retired, and I've always had an interest in real estate, and
Mhm.
my background is in finance. And so, I'm familiar with the note side.
Mhm.
And so, just in learning, it just seems like over the past 6 months, approximately the past 6 months, I've heard and read a lot about this so-called, buying on a lease option, then exit strategy, seller finance, or taking subject to and then seller finance. And it just seems to me, at least, the stories I'm hearing, I'm just not sure that a lot of investors are really explaining to the sellers, what they're getting involved in. And, I'm trying to learn the pros and the cons, the ins and outs. And I just was wondering, if you are doing any wrap mortgages since you're involved in seller finance.
Yes, I do them sparingly, but also I'm not a high volume person. I'm a boutique operator, and any one of you could do, you know, you don't, if you can maximize, if you can make a little go a long way. If you know how to profit 2 or 3 times from the same deal and over a span of time, you don't need a high volume of deals to make things work. And I have done some. These days, I think it's more dicey. And that's why yes, you can do it. And there are ways to, if you're going to do it, if you're going to take over somebody's financing, there are ways to be for proper disclosure and proper protection of all parties. Does that happen in general? No, because we've got wholesalers, a lot of wholesalers doing it on high volume, being half trained and not understanding the liability that they're setting up for themselves and other people. Because most of the time, and I did share this before, now it's been a few months, but I did have a lady that she's just in fits because she gave up subject to, and then the person quit paying the mortgage. And in the meantime, she's on Facebook bragging about her new house. In the meantime, this mortgage and her credit's down, and she had no mechanism to get back control of the property to even start paying on the loan, even if she could. So when you have that kind of thing happening, the regulators are fixing to get in on this, right? Especially when you've got a ton of half-trained people just assigning these things. It's one thing if you have the relationship and you're going to stay on the hook to make sure that mortgage gets paid, and you already understand that everyone understands that, hey, there's a certain percentage chance that this loan could get called or accelerated. And they do have ways of finding out. And with AI, you can bet it's going to become easier and easier to figure out when there's been a transfer of title in some meaningful way where that gives the lender the right to accelerate. They don't have to. It's not illegal. It's a breach of contract, so they have the right, but they don't have to exercise it to call the loan due. It's just messy, right? It's messier. So I would do it, but only if I was involved. And also if we had predetermined, because let's say I bring someone in and yes, I'm going to be involved here, I better know how to fix that. If I've turned around and promised these terms and someone has given me an option fee or a down payment, I better be personally prepared to know exactly what's going to happen, how we're solving the problem if that loan gets called, even if it's only a 2% chance. Everyone's got to know, because if I can't cure if I can't pay that loan, the seller can't pay that loan, the buyer can't pay that loan, the buyer has no idea. The seller usually doesn't know what they're in for, but usually the buyers that got hooked up, with the assignment or whatever, they don't understand that they might lose if they can't refinance. If the loan gets accelerated, they could lose everything they've put down, all their monthly payments, any improvements they've done to the property could go poof. Nobody's telling mostly. So I'm offended by that. and it's a useful tool if done properly, full disclosure, everybody knows the what ifs, everyone knows the risks. But I would never wholesale or assign anything because that person's my grandma usually, or my cousin, or my sister. You know what? That person, I've made an obligation. And yes, there are things that could happen that I couldn't foresee, and I can't fix everything. But, so for that reason, Bob, I don't like focusing on that. With 38% of properties in the country representing 32.8 trillion plus in equity, I want to focus on the high equity sellers. That's where the juice is. And without all of this crappy, risky other stuff. I'm not saying I wouldn't do it. And if I would do it, I'm not even sure I would say it. So there's something you just keep private because you're like, I don't want other people doing this. Because sometimes not because it's illegal, but it's like maybe a little riskier than I want other people to take on sometimes. Does that make sense?
It does. It really does. I agree 100% with what you're saying. I personally believe that there's a lot of problems lying ahead for a lot of investors getting involved in these. For example, I heard one guy recently say that they focus on the down payment only. They don't even have the buyer underwritten.
Oh Lord!
RML,
boy!
And things like that, or they don't understand the market for secondary notes when there's a note involved. That a seller, for example, may want to eventually sell a portion of their note down the road, but the terms of the note they're creating, no institutional note buyer would buy a note at anywhere near par value.
The numbers, so usually these subject twos are done with, they're very thin equity. Normally, there might be maybe 50% equity. Those are the hardest to figure out how to handle. When you got like 50% equity. If you got high equity, there's a certain strategy you use. If you got low equity, there's a certain perfect strategy you use. But that middle of the road's tough. But usually, the whole point of these subject twos is you put 5,000, 10,000, I don't know, 20,000 down, and you take over that payment. Usually, so then to think you can create a note that you can sell to pay off that debt is usually a very misguided understanding, because the seller would be better off to drop the price on their house 10% if they could, if they had the equity position, and sell for cash, because nobody can, the margins are thin. Who's going to pay? You're right. You're right, Bob. It's the exit strategy for the notes. It's perfect if done well. It's used very poorly with very little understanding. And that's why, I should make a whole thing about this, like get certified, because we've got title companies, escrow companies, attorneys, real estate brokers, accountants, financial advisors. The piece they are missing, and that only us in the note business can fill, because we deal in notes day in and day out. We buy and sell for our own portfolio. Only people like us know the secondary market. So that's why this conversation is so critical, and it's so invisible. It's like, I forget how invisible even just seller financing is, let alone, I was talking to a gal last night who's, honestly, she's coaching me to go like, how do you pitch and get this story out, to get published and get a wider awareness. And, she's a smart gal and she's, I don't know, 40-ish. And it was totally Greek. Totally Greek. Just the concept that you mean you don't need a bank to buy a property. So there's a lot of things that we take for granted. Those of us have been around the conversation for a while. I mean, I haven't asked a bank for a loan in 25 years. And other people are like, wait, what? Seller what? Wait, how do they do that? Or really? So anyway, I'm rambling again. I'm getting soapboxy. And then I've lost where we were going with this, Bob.
No, you've answered my question, Don. I appreciate it. I think what I'll do is go out to your website and schedule a call with you about your
because
services.
That would be great, because when you're serious, let's get a realistic view of the market. There are so many rich, juicy opportunities in this market and the one that's coming, and in any market. Because even when people were telling me it's a great market, no one does seller financing. Oh, that's weird. It's just the agents don't get paid because they don't understand it. I did my own deals, right? And I recently getting relicensed after being a broker in California for a few years, but it's been a minute. But I passed the test.
And it's funny you say that, because I've recently decided I have a real estate license right now. I decided to do it primarily, not that I want to be a traditional real estate agent, because I don't, but I feel like I need to understand, my state laws in order to do it. And it will add some credibility to me as I start talking with sellers. And, another problem I see big, you see these so-called gurus telling people, and I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know for a fact, but they say just get an option on a property, and go out and market it. And then,
without the lease piece, just the option.
Yes.
Without the lease, just an option. Well, actually, I do agree that in some circumstances, that is a great solution. Just for example, real quick, and I also think, there's value to what you said. But like, for instance, when an option would be the humane thing to do is there was I got brought a deal from a wholesaler in Reno, and the lady, she was trying to get a private loan, or she wanted not to sell the property. So we were trying to figure out, how can you get the money you need? I think there was a bankruptcy bill that needed to be paid, or she was going to lose the house, or they're going to sell the house. So it wasn't a lot of money. I think it was $6,000 was all it needed. But I could tell she was already encumbered up to the hilt. Like, she was having a hard time making her payment as it was. And I'm like, I'm not going to foreclose on this lady. And I don't need regulation to tell me if I'm going to do that or not. Okay. But I'm not going to foreclose, but I'll take an option to buy the property, at a certain price. But I am not going to add to her liability and then be forced to foreclose. I'm not doing that, right? And so then when it came time where she was forced to sell the property, luckily for her, and I was very happy that the prices had gone up. So she was looking at, instead of almost no equity, she was walking away with like $50,000, $80,000. So good for her. But she would have lost the property if somebody didn't come up with $6,000 right then. So then the people that are asking for the payoff are like, you are such a creep. You're going to rob her of all this equity. And I'm saying, wait a minute. No. You want to give me a payoff? It was some other guy. Well, we're going to give her a private loan. Oh, this was before she sold it. We're going to give her a loan, and you're trying to steal her equity. And I said, yeah, but you guys are going to foreclose on her if she doesn't pay, and she can't afford it. and I won't. So anyway, it got a little heated, but at the end, what happened is that I said, just everyone calm down, send me a payoff. And I think I made it for $9,000 or $10,000, okay. I gave her the chance to get to 50 to 80,000 equity. And I wasn't trying to steal it. I was securing my position. If the market had crashed, my option would have been worth nothing, right? Because why would I exercise an option on a property that's less than what's owed on the property, So anyway, go ahead, Bob.
Well, no. Yeah, I
did it to
understand
you
what you're
again.
saying, but the options. If you put an option on a property, I'm guessing that you can take the property down. You're putting an option. You can close if you need to.
No,
But
it's the right, but not the obligation to exercise us at a certain price within a certain time. So, what if somebody needed a new roof and they couldn't, afford the loan, and you don't want to be a lender in this environment, right?
I'm speaking of the situation where an investor will put an option on a property with no intent. All they're trying to do is make it put a contingency in the contract that says, if I can find a buyer within 90 days, and I'll sell the property for 5 to 10% more than what I'm paying you. Then, in essence, they find a buyer, then they'll assign the option to the seller.
Yeah, tell me what your problem is with that again. Start fresh in case I missed it.
Well, and I feel like a person in that situation is acting as a real estate agent. I mean, they're doing it's the same thing.
Yeah, it's like wholesalers, and there's nothing wrong with wholesaling, and
No, I agree.
and that's why it's good to be licensed, because I used to think, like, that's why I didn't, when I moved to Nevada from California. And for those of you elsewhere in the country, it's not Nevada, it's Nevada, because we're just like simple people. It's so funny. I like Nevada. It sounds very elegant. But anyway, let me see what I do to myself. Anyway, I thought, I don't want the conflict, right? I don't want the fiduciary. I want to just be an investor. There's a fiduciary, it just gets a little messy, but I've changed my tune on that because, number one, wholesalers and investors, there's a lot of pressure starting to build for wholesalers or anyone doing this to be licensed anyway. So I'm just getting ahead of the curve. Plus, I can serve more people, right? Because if you're already doing the marketing, real estate marketing, which sometimes can be expensive, why not have all the ways to profit that you can? Right. And so I like your idea, but I have a person right now. I'm saying you should probably list your property. And they're like, no, this is they're inherited. The gentleman died. Okay, so this is 3 kids, only one of whom lives locally, and that person doesn't have the resources to really deal with it. And I said, you should probably list it and blah, 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 blah. It does need a new roof, which is tricky, right? Because you can get away with a lot of sins, but there's not a lot of lenders that'll close on a roof that's not fixed. But anyway, I said, no, we want a price. We want a price we can count on. And I said, you realize that if I do it that way, I have to make a profit. You know that I'm going to make a profit. Yes. We want a guaranteed number, even if it's lower, that we know we're going to get within this amount of time. So just because one important idea I can't believe the hour goes so fast, is this, it's not a one size fits all. And what we would do is not what somebody else would do. What their perfect picture is, like, it's mean not to offer that. Like it's such a gift for them to know, we just know we don't have to work hard. We don't have to fly in and do all this stuff. We know we're going to get this amount on this by this date or sooner. And we don't have to do anything else. That's a gift to someone. So even though I think, and if it were me, I would do it a different way, but everybody's needs are different. So
I agree. All right. Well,
but you got
I appreciate
it covered.
the conversation.
Yeah, I thank you so much. That was very rich to work with, rich conversation, and brings up a lot of great points. And so, you know what? Let's just make sure the agents that are out there. I need to create some like certification course, or something like, hey, we know what we're doing when it comes to seller financing. But if you're that investor agent blend, you're in a really good position to help people. But so help people create financial solutions, just one mom and pop to another. And the young person that was on the phone, thanks, Clarissa. Thank you guys. She's like, mom and pop. Like I'm a millennial. I'm on that border of Gen Z or X. I can't remember what it is. Mom and pop, you're like talking about old people. And I said, who do you think controls most of the equity in the country? That $32.8 trillion in equity is the old people that mostly control that equity, but they need an exit. They need they need hassle-free income for retirement. And then the young people need, other than big financing, chances to get. So that's a nice marriage made in heaven in many, many situations. So this has been phenomenal. I appreciate you. I just, yeah, it's been wonderful. Thanks for being here, for contributing, and I will catch you next time. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.